Are you looking to sharpen your budgeting skills? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Budget Couple Podcast, where we talk about life, family, and how to afford it. And now, the Budget Couple themselves, Nate and Danielle.
Welcome to the Budget Couple Podcast. I'm Nate.
And I'm Danielle.
And on this episode, we're going to talk about how to budget for a home renovation, and one that we're actually considering possibly maybe doing. But before we get into that, we'd really like you to review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or your podcast listening site of choice. And as always, please, if you have any questions, let us know. You can contact us on Twitter at AskBudgetCouple, or you can drop us a line from our website at budgetcouple.com. And for show notes for this particular episode, you can visit budgetcouple.com/episode 28. So let's go ahead and dive into this. We're kind of at a crossroads here where we're looking at possibly either deciding if we want to go and upgrade our house or if we want to spend money on our current house to make it more of what we want. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's hard because we have grown in income over the past few years since we bought the house, which I think it's now it'll be the 4-year mark in the fall.
Correct.
And it's a great house. We absolutely love it. It is probably enough space for us, to be fair. But there are things we would like to change. I would like a bigger yard and a flatter yard. We actually live on kind of a hill. I would also love a walk-in closet.
You and your closets.
I have taken the entirety of the master bedroom closet, and it is nowhere near enough. So I would like a bigger master bedroom and closet. And there's just some other things like storage area and space that we would like to change. But it's hard because we inevitably start thinking toward the future. And if we were to move up in house, and theoretically we could move up quite a bit. Currently our house is worth about $370,000, and we could easily afford $500 and still be comfortable in our budget, and could probably get it pre-approved for more than that.
But we don't want to.
But it would change our lifestyle a little bit. And it would also drastically change things like paying our house off by the time our son is in high school and being able to retire early if that's what we want to do. There's a lot of things that we want within the next 30 years or so that would become at least a little bit more difficult if we were to go up another, say, $200,000 in house.
Yeah, I don't think it would influence like our retirement savings or anything like that. We'd still be able to do that. But the leftover money that we have after every month, which we usually put on the house or we can put towards trips because we both really like to travel, that becomes not as plentiful as it is now. It's a much more scarce resource. So we have to be more careful about how we budget and what we do because we have less money available to spend on the things that we love to do. So the question becomes, do we want to have a bigger, quote unquote, better house? Although I really like our current house. But if we wanted a bigger house, what are we willing to sacrifice for that? And that's kind of the debate we're having. On the flip side of things, there are things that we can do at this house that will make it more livable for us for a much longer period of time where I don't think we'd wind up moving if we did these things. And it would cost significantly less than a new house would. So we're kind of going through that.
So what we would consider doing if we were to remain in our house and make some changes and do some renovations, we would consider opening up our kitchen. You hear it all about these open floor plans and such that are popular. Well, we have a wall separating our dining room and kitchen. So our kitchen's kind of boxed off, and we would like to open up that wall. And it's actually decent. I don't mind the kitchen. I'm not that.
I can't stand our kitchen.
It needs updating, but
it needs enough updating that it needs to be redone entirely. The cabinets, the doors kind of have a lip on them, so you can only open one cabinet door and the other one opens.
That's a little annoying.
It drives me crazy. The countertops are atrocious.
They are.
I'll put pictures of all these things in the show notes just so you know what I'm dealing with. And I also personally very much hate the floors in there. It's a laminate that doesn't match with the rest of the house at all. It's just put in there, and I don't understand it. It's also a really light color, and we have a 2.5-year-old who likes to spill things. So if we had a darker color floor, it would at least hide some of the spills and make it look a little cleaner than what it usually is.
So there are some things we need to do to our kitchen, and opening that up would really be nice as well. It would just make that area feel a lot bigger.
It really would. And we spend a lot of time in that area. We live in a split level, so we have a kitchen, a living room, all on one floor, and a dining room. So if we open that up, that area would feel significantly bigger, and I think it would just be a little nicer to be in.
And then the other thing we'd like to do is work on our master bathroom. It is not a very big bathroom, but it is just kind of generic and a little outdated. So we just are looking to make that more modern, more updated, probably put in a glass shower door and just make things a bit nicer. Instead of spending a ton on it and making it gorgeous, it would just be some updating.
And this would be the same with the kitchen as well. Even though we'd go through and change a lot of things, we would keep our current appliances, and we're not going top of the line with anything here. That's not how we live. I don't think we have a top of the line anything in our life. So we just kind of want to go through and do reasonable upgrades that will bring back value to our house, but also bring back value to our family where we enjoy what we do. And we didn't cheap out, but we also didn't overspend. That's kind of the balance we're looking for. Going through some basic numbers, I estimate it's going to cost about $30,000. Now, that's a number sort of pulled out of thin air, just based on some preliminary research and some basic work. I think that's a fairly reasonable number for doing what we want to do. I could be completely wrong. It could cost way more than that. I do not think it's going to cost any less than that for what we want to do. So there's a couple ways we can go about kind of figuring this out and what we want to do with the house and how to afford it. The first is we could just save. If we wanted to, we can go through and save all this, and it's probably going to take us about 1.5 to 2 years to save up enough money for that $30,000. But then we'd have that $30,000, we could pay cash for it, take on no debt, and be ready to go. So that's one option. And that's a really good option if we're willing to wait. If we're not willing to wait, or if we just want to kind of go a different route, not save up money for that long, we could go for a home equity line of credit, which is called a HELOC, or we can go for a home equity loan, often called a second mortgage. And we're going to break down those here in just a second. So a home equity loan, which is mostly called a second mortgage, it's a fixed rate interest loan. So right now they're running about 5.5%, but the percentage changes based on how many years you have. The longer the years, the higher the interest rate, because the bigger risk and also in changing inflation and such for the bank, they need to account for that. So that's the main reason for it. You're going to get a lump sum. So if we took this and they got approved, they'd give us a $30,000 check or deposit $30,000 right into our checking account. So we have the money right away. To qualify for this, you just have to have at least 20% of the value of your house paid off, which we do. Our house is worth about $370,000 and we owe about $270,000. So we have that covered. And the terms generally run anywhere from 5 to 15 years, depending on kind of what you want to do. And that's going to influence the interest rate.
And theoretically, we'd be paying this off much sooner than that 5 to 15 years. But we'll talk a bit about that more later.
The second version of this, if we wanted to borrow money, is called a HELOC. Generally, it's what it's called. It's a variable interest. The lowest I found was 5.9, but I found it going up into the 9% range. And usually it has a fixed cost for the first few months where it's a really ridiculously low interest rate. Like I found like 2.99%, but then it jumps way up after that to what the market value is plus margin. So it's going to be 1% or 2% above what the market rate really is. So you're going to spend a lot more money in interest. You draw the money as needed. So instead of getting the $30,000 in your bank, you have a line of credit and you just pull on that line of credit. And once you use it up, it's done. You can pay interest-only payments if you want as you draw. So if I'm going to pay interest on, let's say I want to pull out $5,000 for new countertops, I'm only going to pay on the interest of that $5,000, not on the total amount that I have available to me. I really think this is more of a credit card is how I think of it.
So here's a question about this one then. Since Nate was the one to do a lot of the research on this, as I'm listening, I'm wondering, so it's almost like getting a credit card that has a $30,000 limit. Would you ask them for the limit ahead of time? You would say that you want to be able to draw up to $30,000?
It's kind of an expiring limit. So if you ask for $30,000 and withdraw $5,000, now you can only take out $25,000 is my understanding. And I have to look into it a little bit more because as you'll find through what we're going to talk about here in just a minute, I'm not a huge big fan of HELOCs for a couple of reasons. But my understanding of it is that when you have that $30,000, if you pull out the $5,000, you only have $25,000 left. Even if you pay it off, it doesn't go back to $30,000 because it's a term loan. Even though it's kind of graduated, you still have to use that amount.
So it's slightly different than a credit card in that, but you are still taking out the same amount and having to pay interest on that.
Exactly.
In the same
and
way.
the big thing is it's a variable interest rate, which is the part, one of the things I really don't like about it, because you don't know where that rate's going to be in the next year to 30 years potentially. Because these term loans can go anywhere. They have them at 5, but it's pretty uncommon, and they go all the way up to 30 years, which also is a little uncommon, but 10 to 20 is kind of where they live at from my research. So I want to go through a couple of examples as far as the payments on these, what it looks like, and how it would work as far as different examples. Because in my brain, I want to work out all the different options and figure out what we would be paying per month, and then what the total amount we would pay really is. And that gives me a really kind of value idea of what we're going on with here. I'm going to start with the HELOCs. This HELOC is going to be an 8.1% interest rate, which is from a calculator I put in online. It's a 30-year term, and the monthly payments are going to be about $222. So not really all that terrible to get a $30,000 line of credit for $222 a month.
But a 30-year term.
Exactly.
Very long.
And this is where it kills you. The total cost of this loan is about $80,000, and that's not including any variance in the interest rate. So it could go up. It is not going to go down, because variable interest rates generally don't dip lower. They only stay higher. So if we break it down to total cost, if it cost me $80,000 to get a $30,000 loan, that's a 166% increase on what I would have to pay. That's insane town to me.
So when you're looking at like an 8% interest, it sounds not terrible, 8%, okay. But then when you think through the life of that loan and what you'll actually be paying over, that 166% really kind of gets you thinking, and it just gives you that pause that you hopefully need to take.
Yeah, you're paying a little over 2.5 times what you withdrew for this loan. So again, HELOCs I'm not a big fan of, because the variable interest rate, the long payment terms, and how expensive the loan is. Now let's go to a different HELOC with a much lower interest rate of 6.05%. This is the lowest I could find online, and again, it's variable, so it's not going to stay there. It's going to go up. This is also for a 30-year term, but your monthly payment drops to just a mere $151, which, when you're thinking about $30,000, isn't that much. Our car was around that much money, and our car loan is double that. So it's a relatively inexpensive loan. That's going to cost you, the $30,000 loan is going to cost you $46,000, but it's probably going to cost more than that because of the variance in the interest rate, which is a 53% plus premium on what you're paying. So again, very, very expensive loan in my eyes. Now let's take a look at a home equity loan. I have 3 different examples set at 5, 10, and 15 years, and I've changed the interest rate to reflect what the increases are there. So for a 5-year loan, the interest rate is going to be about 5.5%, a little over that, maybe like 5.6. Your monthly payment is going to be $566. So significantly higher, like 2.5 times what the original HELOC was. But the beautiful thing about this is that for that $30,000 loan, you're going to be paying a total of $34,000, or about a 13% total interest rate on the entirety of the loan. So you're only paying $4,000 worth of interest on that $30,000 loan, which is much better in my book. For a 10-year, the interest rate's just shy of 6%. You're going to pay $332, which is about $40,000, or a 33% premium on that loan. And then finally, if you went to 15 years, that's a 6.44% interest rate. It's going to cost you about $260, and overall you're going to pay about $46,000 on that loan.
So it's easy to get drawn in just looking at the monthly payments by the fact that these HELOCs have, $150. I mean, that's incredible. You can redo your entire kitchen and bathroom and just pay $150 a month
for 30 years.
But you have to think about the fact that that'll impact your budget for 30 years, and that you're going to be paying a lot more than if you had just paid either in cash or through a loan over a shorter period of time. So just because something has a very low monthly payment doesn't necessarily mean it's the best deal. Seems obvious, but still it's an easy thing to get drawn into, especially if you have a lot of monthly costs and you want something that you might not be able to afford any other way.
Now, I did mention that I'm not a big fan of HELOCs, but there is one circumstance where I would consider it, and that's if you're paying off the loan in under a year to maybe a max of 3 years. And the reason for that is because of the variable interest rate, you generally get a much lower interest rate. For one I was looking at, you got a full year at 2.99% of the interest rate. So you'd have a year of that 3 years to pay it off at a very low interest rate of 2.99, and then it goes up to market value plus margin. But you still saved a full year's worth of interest. And if you pay it off in that under 2 years that you have remaining, you're going to save overall in the total interest payment. But that's a game you're going to have to play if you want to go that way. I much rather get fixed into a fixed interest rate with a second mortgage and then leave the variance alone, because variable interest rates, you do not know what they're going to do. And anytime that happens, that makes me nervous. I'm a pretty cautious guy when it comes to that stuff, and I do not want to have any variance in my monthly payments. One other thing I should mention is that all of these calculations are based off of you paying what the minimum monthly payment is. You can put more money on all these things, and that changes the equation a lot, particularly for the higher end ones. So that HELOC at 30 years at 8.1%, that would cost you over $80,000. If you throw $500 a month on it, it's going to cost substantially less than that. It's just a matter of playing the game and doing the math, which I did not do. So I'm not going to play that game because, again, I'm not a variable interest rate guy.
In the end, I would say that both of us would agree that we would probably stick with a 5-year home equity loan at a fixed rate of somewhere around 5 or 6%, if that's what we're able to get. Now, yes, this would still make us pay extra in interest, but it would also give us the flexibility of being able to make these changes sooner rather than having to save in cash for the next 2 or 3 years and wait on that. We'd be able to enjoy what it could bring us sooner. And we would pay it off sooner than that 5 years. So we wouldn't be paying quite as much in interest. And to me, it's the best option, kind of the best of both worlds, though arguably it's smartest just to pay in cash.
Yeah, I think from a pure budgetary standpoint, paying it off in cash is most definitely the best choice. But for enjoyment of life and for getting things done in an efficient and quick manner, maybe look at a home equity loan. But again, only if you can afford it. We have room in our budget where we could take that blow and still put extra on it, and I think we'd be okay. And even if we do decide to sell our house, we'd be looking at an increased value of our house because of the improvements we've done. So that might help us out in that buying process as well. It could make our house more valuable. It could make it more attractive to buyers. Even if it doesn't increase the value that much, it could make it easier to sell. So there's a couple other things to think about. But hopefully just us going through this basic discussion of what we want to do, why we want to do it, and a couple of scenarios for how we would afford it might help you go through everything.
So we're going to wrap things up for this episode, but we also want to quickly thank, we got a couple emails that came in over the last few weeks, and we want to thank you guys, and we are looking into them and are going to respond, and then we're going to craft an episode or two to answer them on the air and provide some more feedback.
If you have any questions for us, you can contact us at Ask Budget Couple on Twitter or go to our website, budgetcouple.com, and click on the contact form. An email goes right to my personal inbox. So you'll have it there. And show notes for this episode can be found at budgetcouple.com/episode 28. I'll have pictures in there of what our house looks like currently and what we want to do. And I'll also have all of the amounts I talked about because I know, particularly when we're going through tables and stuff, it's much easier in a visual format than it is talking about it over the interwebs or data here. But that's where we're at. Thank you so much for the questions we got. We can't wait to answer more, and we'll leave you know what we've decided to do in the coming weeks or months, because I don't think we've decided anything fully yet.
Not at all. We just started talking.
So that's where we're at. We're probably several months away from even making a beginning to make a decision on this, and even there, I don't think we're going to make a decision anytime super soon.
So we look forward to any more questions or comments from you guys, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Budget Couple Podcast with your hosts, Nate and Danielle. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit budgetcouple.com. Make sure to check out the next episode of the Budget Couple Podcast, where we'll talk more about life, family, and how to afford it. We'll catch you next time.